I was gratified to see President Trump name a very academically, professionally, and from a monetary policy point of view, qualified individual in Kevin Warsh as his nominee to succeed Jay Powell as chairman of the Federal Reserve. Kevin's years of experience in financial markets as a former governor of the Fed, I think keenly have him knowledgeable of the responsibilities and the leadership needed to guide America's central bank. And I hope that calmer heads will prevail on this investigation around Jay Powell, and that we don't have Warsh's nomination held up because of that. We need that successive leadership, and we need it confirmed, and let them have some overlap and be able to work together.
Well, Senator Thom Tillis says that as of now, he's going to block that nomination until that legal matter is resolved. Are you calling on the Department of Justice to drop its investigation into Jerome Powell?
Well, I know Senator Tillis's point of view, and you saw my statement about the investigation of Jay Powell on potentially having misled Congress about the building renovation plans over at the Fed. I think that's a distraction. I don't think that's a topic that deserves a DOJ investigation, in my personal view. I made that clear within hours of that public information hitting. And I said part of that distraction was this is going to potentially delay President Trump's own economic agenda, which includes getting his choice confirmed in the Senate. So that's why I think it's important. I hope that the DOJ can more promptly review the data, review their decision, and take a final decision on their whether or not they're going to pursue the case. I just want people to know publicly this is, as I say, a distraction and could delay President Trump's own macroeconomic agenda.
Well, obviously, we're deeply curious to know what the timeline is, and we don't have a sense of that when it comes to the Department of Justice. But assuming this is resolved and there's a Chair Warsh in the months ahead, Mr. Chairman, I wonder your thoughts on Jay Powell staying with the Fed. He could be there for another 2 years. Would that be a good thing, or do you worry about having a scenario in which there's a shadow chair, so to speak?
Well, I think Chairman Powell has to take that decision once Chairman Warsh is confirmed about whether he'll leave the Fed at the time of his chair term ending in May or continue as a governor. I think a lot of that depends on what happens over the next few weeks. I think it's important, though, that President Trump have his chair nominated and confirmed as effectively as possible, because I think that's an important component in making sure we get price stability right in conjunction with all the things we're doing, Joe, to help our economy have a faster growth and a sustained growth that benefits all of America's working families. We've done a good job on the tax side, preventing a huge tax increase on working families. We are lowering the regulatory compliance burden on American businesses, particularly small businesses and community banks. We're opening up energy markets across the country to bring down energy prices. These are all things that I think have the promise of giving us good, strong economic growth in 2026. And I just don't want to have the monetary policy aspect of that be under a shadow in these early months of the year.
Well, as we're thinking about a future Fed under a potential Chair Warsh, he has previously indicated that he'd be willing to give up some of the aspects of bank supervision. I'm wondering what regulatory role Congress would be willing to step into, if at all. What does this perhaps mean for bolstering your own oversight capacity when it comes to bank regulations?
Well, we have a vigorous oversight of bank supervision across all the bank regulators, credit union regulators. And we do that through both our legislative work on making concrete legislative reforms that would tailor that compliance regulation, focus it, tie it to bank complexity, bank size. And we also, using our influence with the regulators, whether it's Jonathan Gould at the Comptroller of the Currency, Travis Hill at the FDIC, or Mickey Bowman, the Vice Chairman of the Fed, how do we have a harmonized, balanced, and common approach? We got way off track in the Biden administration. Costs went up. I think safety and soundness compliance actually went down as the Biden administration focused on things like DEI instead of bank safety and soundness. So we want to play a role in what the executive branch might consider on any reform to that compliance and supervisory process. But the point you mentioned about the Fed and their role of supervising large banks and bank holding companies, trying to consolidate that effort's that's an idea as old as the Fed's creation itself back in 1913.
Mr. Chairman, there's a hope that lower interest rates would help to unlock some motion in the housing market here. And this is something the president has expressed a lot of concern about, because if you start to get to this as well, he's worried that you start to raid people's nest eggs if housing values start to come down. You were right here on Bloomberg TV and radio after you passed your housing bill out of committee that would cut red tape and spurn more building here. The majority leader signaled it would be coming soon in an interview. Do you have a sense of timeline on this?
Well, Joe, I do. I think our 21st Century Housing Act focuses on the supply. We want to lower the cost of constructing housing, and we want to increase the supply. It's not a demand-oriented bill, and I think that's what we need right now. I think there are other ways to tackle it as well, and my friends on the House Ways and Means Committee have approaches they might want to take that could unlock housing and increase supply. So if you have lowering interest rates and you have the red tape cut, which we propose in 21st Century Housing, and you combine that with freeing up our community banks to make loans, which is an objective we have in our Main Street Capital Access Act, that's a perfect way to unlock housing availability to more families through lower cost and more supply. I hope that bill can come to the House floor in just a few days. I really am pushing for that. I think it's the right decision. I've told President Trump that housing and housing availability, housing accessibility, and housing costs are absolutely at the top of the agenda for the American people, families all over this country. And with his help, we can get this bill passed in the House and signed into law.
In the final minute we have you, Chair Hill, do you have a date set yet for Jerome Powell's semi-annual testimony to Congress? And do you expect him to make that appearance?
I do. I expect Chairman Powell to appear before the committee. We are working with his office to set that date. We also tend to coordinate that very carefully with the Senate Banking Committee as well, so that those testimonies are in the same week, and that work continues. But we look forward to having Chairman Powell to talk about his Humphrey Hawkins obligation to give his semi-annual monetary policy testimony.
Yeah, that's news, Mr. Chairman. There had been a thought that he might not be able to or willing to appear. How about the Treasury Secretary in our remaining moments? Do you have an opportunity to bring Scott Bessent before the committee for testimony soon?
Secretary Bessent will be back before the committee in really hours rather than days. And we look forward to talking to him and his opportunity to be before the committee and answer the committee's questions. And I want to say, as we wrap up, what a great job he did on providing excellent candidates for President Trump's consideration to be the next chairman of the Fed. Treasury Secretary Bessent managed a terrific process.